the recording. Okay, so hi everybody. We'll start shortly with today's presentations, but before that, I just want to say a couple of words about Sofia Revit User Group and what we do. So basically, this is a local Revit user group aiming to bring together the local community interested in BIM, especially Revit. We organize live events, as you may know, and shortly we will also give more information about the next live meeting. But for now, we will continue with our webinar and web format. And before giving the word to our guest today, I just want to again thank to our kind sponsors. Without them, we just will be really struggling to organize all this and keep the pace that we are trying to keep. So thank you, and don't forget everybody that you could also help us and support us on the Patreon platform. So now I'll give the word to our guest today to introduce himself and say whatever he has to say today to us. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you to the Sofia Revit User Group for inviting me to come. It's a pleasure to join you here today. And I have agreed with Peter that I will do a little presentation today about what I feel is the future of BIM in the AEC industry. And I have also agreed with Peter that if you guys have any questions during the presentation or during the session, maybe you can just type them in the chat and then I'll get Peter's help to understand when they are coming. I'll do the best that I can to present my material with the things that I have prepared. Yeah, so I'll share my screen and go from there. Let's see. Host disabled participant screen sharing. I don't think I can share my screen, Peter.
Yeah, just a second. I was about to correct that. Just a second.
Is everyone hearing me okay? Thank you. That's
Okay.
Good to know.
Now you should be able to share your screen.
All right. Share screen.
Yeah.
Oh, there we have Revit. Wow, that was quick. I came to the Sofia Revit User Group and I was preparing a presentation, and then we have Revit after just a few seconds. That's great. So I actually planning on showing a little bit of Revit and our product, how it works with Revit, but also talk about Revit generally, I think. But before we do that, and I suppose perhaps it is what people are more interested in seeing Revit and clicking in Revit and talking about Revit, I really need to zoom out a little bit in the beginning of the presentation. So I prepared a small PowerPoint where I will use to help me explain a little bit about what I feel is important when it comes to BIM and Revit for the immediate future in our industry. And it could be that maybe not everything is super relevant for what's going on in Bulgaria, but I'm pretty confident that it is going to be extremely relevant in large parts of the world in the future. So this is my presentation. My name is Håvard Vasshaug, and I'm a Norwegian engineer. I'm 46 years old, and I'm chronically restless. So I have worked in engineering, and I then moved to IT consultancy. That is where I found Revit. So I came out of university exactly 20 years ago, and I went into engineering, and got tired of reinforcing and formwork and bending schedules and drawings, and I went into IT consultancy. I found Revit, and I saw the light. I suppose it's kind of like ironic even that I'm still working with Revit on, if not a daily basis, then quite often. 18 years now since I saw Revit for the first time in my life. I became an IT consultant, and my job for several years was to do training sessions and to teach people how to use Revit, architects and engineers mainly. My experience in architecture was very, very small, so it was difficult to do Revit training, but there were very few engineers back in 2005, 6, 7, 8 who were using Revit at the time. So most of the engineers at that time, at least in Norway, were using AutoCAD, and then architects were poking into this Revit space. So I got exposure, I suppose, in the architectural industry already back then. After some years, I got tired again of being an IT consultant, and I wanted to get like a engineering job again. So I went back and I worked in Rambøll, which is a pretty big international engineering firm. I was there for 3-4 years, and I implemented a lot of workflows that had to do with my old nemesis, if you want, the rebars and the bending schedules, but this time using BIM. So we were already back then starting to get into this space of producing models for construction for rebar, probably because there are so many rebar elements in a building, and doing rebar drawings and formwork drawings and bending schedules really seemed like such a waste of time when we were 3D modeling it already. I traveled many times to the United States to talk to Autodesk about how to improve Revit in ways that would help engineers to get better and more efficient in the production of construction-ready rebar designs in 3D with the database that is in Revit. And I'm happy to say that that workflow has greatly improved during the last 10-15 years. But eventually, just like gravity, you know, it pulled me out. I got restless again, and I had to go into a different space. And I got in touch with some architects 12-13 years ago, and I started working in architectural firms, and that was a great joy for me. I really liked working with architects. I really liked working with architecture, I ended up in a pretty big international firm here in Oslo called Snøhetta, where I started getting into computational BIM, visual programming, Dynamo, Grasshopper, and connecting all of those workflows and tools to my BIM background, if you want. So somewhere along the line, in the international building industry, this new term appeared. Computational designers was a thing, and BIM managers was a thing. And then someone invented, I don't know who it was, but this computational BIM person, which kind of, in many ways, you could say is like a person who works in ArchiCAD or Tekla or Revit, but operates using Grasshopper and Dynamo, visual programming interfaces. So I started with that, and I figured out that that was difficult. It was difficult to do alone. There were computational designers that I could talk to at the companies about how, for instance, Grasshopper works. And there were BIM people, BIM managers, and very, very skilled design technology managers who knew everything about BIM and Revit that I could work with. But there were very few people who knew how to do both. How do you build a Grasshopper component that can do something in Revit? How can you bridge data or live feed data between Dynamo and Grasshopper? How can you do this and this and this in Dynamo? And that was difficult. I was the only person in many of these firms that getting into this space. So I went to conferences and got in touch with like a few other people who were working in the same field, like trying to poke into this area that was emerging very, very slowly. I mean, the Grasshopper community was a little bit before that, but Dynamo was first shown to human beings in 2011. I think in 2013 it was launched, and the forum came out in 2014 or something like that. So that's like 10 years ago. And right then, when Dynamo started, very, very, very in the beginning, by coincidence and luck, I suppose, I got in touch with some of the really, really good people in that space from the Dynamo forums and from the different conferences that we went to, and got to know some of them really well. And I created this group called the Bad Monkeys together with some of them. We invited more people, and I'm very, very happy to report that one of the best, one of the biggest Dynamo legends ever to have walked the face of the earth is from Sofia in Bulgaria. So I don't think he is here with us today because he has heard my speech so many times, so that I think he's tired. But yeah, so it means a lot for me to talk with you, to be in kind of like very, very small part of me through a Zoom in Bulgaria today. So Dimitar Venkov, who is a big it's a personality. Oh, I seem to have lost my video. Well, maybe it's better now. Dimitar Venkov is a big personality in the Dynamo community, and along with many others. And we manifested that community in a small kind of like sub-community, if you want, the Bad Monkeys. Global reach. We span all the way from Adam in Brisbane to Marcelo in Los Angeles, Conrad in Chicago, Julian in Germany, Julian in France, Andreas Dichmann in Germany. And then Dimitar moved from Singapore back to Bulgaria, his home country, and we keep in touch even today. But eventually, the Bad Monkeys network became a network of Bad Monkeys companies. So not all of them, but some of them started establishing their own companies. Adam's Automation in Australia and Conrad's Archilab out of Chicago. Dimitar has a company, Bad Monkeys Ltd in Sofia, Bulgaria. And then we did the same in Norway. And because me and Dimitar are both in Europe, we started collaborating a lot, very closely on a few of the projects that started appearing in the market in Europe. Because, yeah, I quit my job at Snøhetta 5.5 years ago. That was a knife in the heart. I really loved working at Snøhetta, but the market, the potential for what we were doing was really good, so I had to do it. And I started off, at first the company was called Bad Monkeys. Dimitar had his Bad Monkeys in Bulgaria. I had Bad Monkeys in Norway. It was just me. And then collaborating with Dimitar on most of the jobs. And we did well. There seemed to be a great demand for like this Dynamo expertise, Revit expertise, how to make a good IFC file from Revit, and how to program something in Dynamo, taking some data out, manipulating it and pushing it back into Revit. So in the first years, we did a lot of work in that space, and then we got more and more advanced. Dimitar learned how to build Revit add-ins using C#. We were already poking into Python. And then, long story short, I think a year ago, we were like 10, 12 people in this company that we then changed the name to Reop. And then at the same time, we decided to build a product because we had been solving the same problems over and over and over again. Not all of the problems the same, like when Reop became a consultancy firm that was reacting to the market. So whatever the market would ask us, we go and solve it. But a big portion of those problems that we got asked to solve using custom development with Dynamo, with Grasshopper, Python, C#, whatever, had to do with the data quality. And I'll get back to that briefly. What is that? Why was that important? But to close that introduction, longest introduction in history, I'm sorry for that, but to close it off, we a year ago decided to branch out a new company. It's called Anchor. It's headquartered here in Oslo, at the same place as Reop. And we closed funding this summer, and it's scaling up and building something that seems to be very important for a lot of people in the industry. And I'll again, I'll get back to why that is, I think. As I said, longest introduction. I'm sorry for that. I'll try to, I'll do it better next time, and I'll try to move faster now. So what do I feel is important, or what, not just me, what does the industry feel is important in the years to come? Well, something changed. I have been using Revit for 18 years. The industry has been using Revit, like some people even say 25, 30 years. BIM is old. People learned how to build a parametric database in 3D, which is, in my world, exactly what Revit is. It's a parametric database in 3D. People learned how to do that. People learn how to do collision control, how to make sure that you have the same coordinate system, how to make good model, basically. And you know, in Revit, if you have a good model, you stand a much greater chance of having a good drawing, if drawing is the outcome. So what happened? Well, there was a problem that appeared in the AEC industry, not all over the globe, but in some parts of the world a few years ago. And that problem, I think I can describe with a very, very simple graph. Over time, people outside of the design communities, I mean architects and engineers, started to ask for information. Building owners and contractors started to ask architects and engineers to produce more and more information. They figured out pretty quickly that if we sign a contract and I get an architect to do a job, and then after a little while I go and ask that architect to start adding more information to the model, he will start saying no. So what do I do then? Oh, and the next project I put into the contract that, oh, if you're working for me, you need to fill out all of this stuff. And that stuff is in many, many, many projects called data or information from data. And the amount is increasing exponentially into an overwhelming amount of data that people in many parts of the world, not everywhere, but many parts of the world, have to deal with today. So there's an increasing gap in the difference between client information requirements, what a building owner, what your client needs from your design process, and your ability and willingness to deliver that. So speaking in plain Revit language, what is happening is that your client wants you to put a bunch of properties or parameters on every single element in your Revit file, because he or she then stand a much greater chance at being able to use that model as a digital twin for archiving or operations and maintenance, and for the contractors to use it in digital construction than he would if it was blank. And I've seen a lot of blank IFC files and Revit files where you click on the window and there's just width and height and thickness, and that's it. And it's not usable for anything. So this is very, like, not rocket science. It's super simple, actually, but very, very difficult to do, because Revit, wow, guess what? I'm going to swear in church. Revit is not a very, very advanced database to work effectively when these data sets become big. So this is the, if not the biggest, then at least one of the biggest problems that the industry has today. Clients, owners, and contractors are asking for data instead of drawings. They want to digitize their processes. And to get that data, they have to ask the people who create the BIM, which is the architects and the engineers, the design teams, to produce that data. And the architects and the engineers have big problem producing that data in their tools today. ArchiCAD, Revit, Tekla, Civil 3D, NovaPoint, you name it, whatever. So, and that triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, it looks like this. Builders need the designers' data, owners need designers' data, designers need owners' requirements, and designers need builders' requirements. And this whole circle of information exchange now is trying to digitize with data instead of drawings. And that is the essence of everything that I've been obsessing about the last couple of years. And this is the reason why people started 5, 6, 7 years ago asking me to build Dynamo scripts together with Dimitar, was that actually this was happening. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I do. So what do they want? The owners, they want an archive of their buildings, at least the big public ones here in Northern Europe. Probably there's different incentives driving different owners in different places on the planet and in different industries. But like the big infrastructure projects and the big building projects, at least the public ones, they have a clear and written down strategy to archive digital assets, whether it's a Revit file or an IFC file or a database or something else. It doesn't really cut it with a DWG anymore or a PDF. So you want to have a digital representation of the assets you own, because then you can not just search and filter through that database or through that data. You know, how many rooms do I have in this building and how many rooms do I have in this building? When do we need to change the window and when do we need to do that? That's like operations and maintenance. But also they want to prepare for a future where they can use artificial intelligence and machine learning on their data set, because that is like, come on, we're talking about AI in the building industry, and nobody really has a data set that they can apply AI algorithms to. So they are preparing for that. Of course, they also want return of investment on the stuff that they are doing. So a lot of the building owners who started off with like 500 parameters, oh, you need to put all these 500 parameters on all the elements in Revit, they are having a hard time today, because they started understanding that every single parameter has a cost. You need to pay an architect to do it. So that doesn't make a lot of sense, because of course they also want effectiveness like everyone else. The builders, they have a hard time trusting the data that they are receiving. So imagine that you're a builder, you have a helmet and you're out on the construction site with an iPad or a laptop or a computer or whatever, and you're looking at data and models instead of drawings. And the way that data is being quality assured and produced today in architectural firms and engineering firms is at best not very advanced. So a lot of mistakes. They click on an element and filter on a parameter and just weird shit happens, and it's very difficult for them to deploy these processes in their organizations, because they don't, when you don't trust the data, nobody uses it. They also want effectiveness, of course, also, but what is happening when data is being streamed from design teams to construction sites is also a lack of autonomy within the contractor environments, because when you send a Revit file or an IFC file or a model or a database to a contractor and they don't have any tool or ability to work with that data the way that they would work with a drawing, you print a drawing from Revit, boom, send it out to construction site. They would take the drawing, put it on the table, and then take a pen and start, sketching and blah, 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 working with it. And a lot of the contractors, they are going to need to have that autonomy with data also in the future. And they are tired of calling the architect, hey, please, can you change that property on that element in that Revit file and export it again? They want to do it themselves. And lastly, common for both the building owners and the contractors is that there's a greater need for attributes. BIM, in its essence, in many ways, is elements with attributes. You have model elements, door, window, duct, rebar, and these elements have attributes. And for 25 years, we have really learned how to build elements, and we've learned how to build parametric elements. So I know how to do a width parameter on a window and a height parameter on a door. But what contractors and building owners are starting to ask for is what about my attributes? So this is in many ways, you can say that the essence of this problem is this, that the attributes are going to increase greatly, probably far, far, far beyond just like 3D geometry or families or elements, if you want. That's the common denominator for the building owners and the contractors. And then for designers, yes, I've worked in many design firms over the years, and I think that designers, what they really want to do is that they want to design. They don't want to spend their lives producing BIM for contractors and building owners. Well, of course, some do, They want peace and tranquility to sit and focus on design and designing quality space and quality systems and quality structures. And everyone, of course, wants effectiveness. So this is like the irony of this story is that owners want data, contractors want data, designers want to design, and everyone wants effectiveness. But the mechanism of this whole circle is that effectiveness just goes down for everyone. That is the big question that we're going to talk about today. Oh, yeah. And for designers, there's just one thing that I have to say, and that is that when the information requirements increase and the only tool we have is to ask human beings to sit down on a computer and start punching data, the documentation arrow goes up and the design arrow goes down, because you have a fixed fee, and the more time you spend on documentation, which is, I suppose, what you are contractually obliged to deliver, it hurts design quality. And is that really something that we as human beings, like if I'm buying a house, do I want to buy a house from that has been designed by an architect who has had like 99% time to design it, or that spent half of his time producing documentation in Revit? I'm pretty sure which house I would buy, unless it's crazy expensive, of course. But that's another topic. So we want the design time to go up and we want the documentation time to go down. At least that's what I want. 3 examples from the different types of people that I'm talking about. This is a render of the new Viking ship museum in Oslo, Norway, right outside of Oslo. It's in the city, but not the city center. And this is a building that is currently under construction. Danish architectural firm Art won the competition. They brought on Multiconsult engineering firm in Oslo to do the engineering disciplines on this project. And it's a public project. It's a museum, so it's a public project. And the public building owner, Statsbygg, which is one of the bigger ones, maybe the most exposed one, they have had their BIM information requirements out in the public in contracts for more than 4 years now. And on all the projects that they have had and managed before, they have had big problems on getting the data delivered from design teams, because it's been, well, yeah, we can get back into why. But on this project, they were able to succeed, and the design team, Art and Multiconsult, and the contractor, AF Gruppen, and the building owner, Statsbygg, have been able to establish a process that quality assures the information for the digital twin for the owner, and quality construction data from Revit for the contractor. And what they have done, I'm not going to show that here, but we can just talk about it. I'll show some things afterwards. Is that they put in, of course, Anchor. Like, I talk about what I believe in, and I believe in what we're doing at Anchor. But there's going to be other tools in the market that do the same things. So for Statsbygg and for AF Gruppen on this project, it became vital as a first step to establish an automated quality assurance process. So the architects and the engineers, they design in Revit, and then they produce IFC files for the contractor and the building owner, and they put this into something that's called a common data environment, which is like Dropbox for projects. And then once they do that, we pull out the BIM from the common data environment, put it into Anchor, and once it comes into Anchor, it automatically executes a bunch of pre-configured validation rules that the BIM team of the owner and the contractor are configuring together with the design teams. So and then take the results of this validation. Imagine like a diagram. You have numbers and text like elements and files and contracts and so on, and then you have green and red indicators for whether the quality of the data is good enough for construction and for the digital twin of the owner. And then they publish the results or stream the results of that validation into the project's Teams channel, so that everyone, absolutely everyone on the project, can get an insight and understanding into what the quality of the data being produced is. And that has been a very, very important component in the success of this project. It has greatly increased the mindfulness of the importance of this for everyone. And they have also, we streamed the results back into Revit, so that the engineer and the architect, when they see, they don't just go to Teams and see red numbers. They can also go into Revit and click on it and fix the things that are not right. And then that feedback loop has just greatly increased quality and reduced the time that people spend trying to ensure that quality. For a contractor example, there's plenty I could choose from, but I'm going with the Danish/Norwegian contractor Relish, who is working on a big road project in the south of Norway, kilometers on kilometers of roads. Everyone who is doing infrastructure project in Northern Europe, or at least in Scandinavia today, have to deliver. They have to have a digital process and deliver BIM. And this is an IFC file that the contractors would normally receive a bunch of IFC files from the engineering teams with all these like elements. What you're seeing here is elements. And then it's the contractor's job to add attributes to those elements. And that is really difficult for a contractor to do. You can open an IFC file in Notepad and go and hack it, or you can ask for the native file, but the native file can be different. It can be a Revit file for a bridge, it can be a Civil 3D file for something else. So it's good for them to establish one process on one common data set. And for them, that is IFC, the Open BIM format. So they receive IFC files, and then they do it every week, new IFC file, new IFC file. So every time they get a new IFC file, they have to go into that IFC file and add the same data week after week. And of course, they change it somehow, but most of the data is the same. So we established, similar to the Viking ship museum, we established a workflow where they stream the IFC file in from a common data environment into Anchor, and then put in place like this Excel-like spreadsheet workflow where we have rows of identifiers, let's call it that, like in Revit language, that would be the mark parameter. So we establish identifiers as rows, and then they can just add all the data in that Excel spreadsheet. We upload that into Anchor together with the IFC file, and it populates the IFC file automatically. So all they have to do is make sure that the data is correct in their Excel spreadsheet, upload it, the IFC comes in, and then enriched IFC goes out. And this really actually is like a physical manifestation of fixing the autonomy problem for a contractor. So they of course then build trust in the data because they are the creators of data, and they trust the identifier because if the identifier fails, they see that in the validation, but they can also increase autonomy by being able to manipulate the data without having to call the engineer to do it. And then simple rendering at the end. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture from Revit on this project, but this is the architect's example, and this is a project in Asker outside of Oslo, Elvely, that the big architectural firm A-Lab has been developing together with a contractor, again, who needs digital construction. So they have set up all of these automation routines, connecting that data and creating that data outside of Revit instead of inside of Revit, and then doing a bunch of automation routines to create it in a consistent way, and the contractor's trust in that data is going up, which increases their ability to deploy new methods in their organization. So I won't talk too much about this because I'll show how a workflow like this can be in Revit in reality. What type of data normally are people adding? Well, you saw the IFC file of the contractor in the previous slide. For a lot of, and this is different from contractor to contractor and from owner to owner. That's a big problem for a lot of design firms today, is that you work for different clients, and different clients have different requirements. So what are you going to do? Will you make a Revit template and a Revit library for each set of clients? You can't really do that. So what you end up doing is minimizing the properties to and reusing them perhaps between projects. So a very common property, whatever client you work for instance, in Norway, they will always ask you to fill out this LOD property. It's not called LOD in Norwegian, but like I think in international English, that is the closest equivalent. So that is just a number, a 3-digit number that says something about the maturity of that element. So if you have a door and you're moving the door around and you're changing its width and height in Revit, and then once it's like fixed or fixing an element, it has several phases, and we use that number to describe those phases. So typically, I don't remember exactly the code, but let's say that if a door has that number 350, it means that it's finished. It has been coordinated with the other disciplines. And if you set it to 375, it means that the contractor can order it. And if it's 300 or 400, it means that it's ready for construction. So there's a standard for that in Norway. We don't have to go into that, but that code becomes, as you can imagine, extremely important for a digital construction process, because imagine engineers and architects working in a bunch of Revit files, Tekla files, and ArchiCAD files, and whatever files, and they have to add this information to every single element in the models across all the models, because the contractor will gather all of this data, put it into their database, and then go and filter every element that has LOD 375. And then they will say, oh, well, great, this is what I'm going to order today. I don't have to say it even. You understand that this is a very important property, because if you get that wrong, there's a shitstorm at construction site. Yeah. And it's the same with this control area. We call it different things in different projects. Some projects call it like work package. Some call it control volume, some call it different things, but it's basically a project breakdown structure, because you don't construct and design an entire building in one operation. It makes a lot of sense from a Revit point of view to have one building in one file, right? You have several buildings, you put them in several files, and then you link them together. But you don't make a file for each floor, like the very, very first Revit guys who came from AutoCAD tried to do. Big mistake. You make one file for a building, and then you have floors, and then you, like in the old way, you make drawings, drawing, right? But when you're streaming data from BIM, like drawings are going away, drawings are going to be a thing of the past. They will not completely disappear. They're great for some purposes, but the main deliverable will be a BIM, elements and attributes. So when the drawings go away, it is important to have a project breakdown structure so that people can filter on the elements. Imagine you're a contractor and you're going to filter all the elements that have LOD 375. You won't do it on the entire project. You will do it on your control area, the area that you're working on now. And that is also an attribute, an element that needs to be completely correct on the deliverable. Same thing with contract number and who's responsible for this contract. A description, because you get tired of all these codes, so you need to read what something is, and like system for MEP and type ID. So that's just a small selection to give you an idea of what kind of data we're talking about. But as I said, some of the building owners, they have like 500 parameters that you need to fill out. I'm going to see some old friends tomorrow who have 85. They have just started working on a project, and then the owner came with like, here's 85 properties that I want on every single element, filled out, correct syntax and everything. So it can be many, many different things. And I would say to the building owners, especially the building owners, a contractor told me once, the only thing I need to know is the LOD and the type ID, the top and the bottom property here. If a contractor knows that, he can more or less like figure out what to do. But the building owners, a lot of them have like this big crush on data quantity these days. So they go and say like, oh, here's my 200 parameters, here's my 500 parameters. And when you have 500 parameters on projects, and they are different from owner to owner to owner, as an engineer and architect, you run into a big problem. So what do we do with this? We have Coke, and then we talk about mindset and tools. I worked with BIM for 20 years almost, and I taught hundreds of Revit classes, and I worked in engineering firms and in architectural firms, and it's the same thing over and over again. And that's good news. It's not bad. It's good news because it means that we can solve it. It's about human beings and their ability to understand a tool. In this space now, when building owners are coming with 500 parameters and contractors are streaming your BIM via a common data environment, we need new tools. I have built one, or not me, but we have built a tool. And I'm going to show it to you afterwards, but we can't forget the importance of the mindset of the people who are going to use tools. Engineers and architects of the future, we have to start understanding how to produce quality data, not just collision control and parametric 3D elements, but data sets. Building owners and contractors, and this is a big secret, I'm going to whisper it. Building owners and contractors don't really care that much about 3D. Wow, is it possible? Yes, it is. So we have to create a mindset of data quality, and we have to create a mindset among designers on how to produce the data that these people need. So I learned a long time ago that when you start a project, one of the most important things you can do is to establish clear goals in the beginning. This is our shit list. They are going to be 150, 1 to 100, you know. Getting a clear idea of where you are going in the end will really help your chance of success when you start a BIM project. And that is going to be the same when we go into this digital twin area. When we create data as architects and engineers, we have to have a mindset about what that data is going to be used for. Or we will never be able to use the tools that people build. So people and tools. I would love to come back to Sofia Revit User Group and talk about mindset one day, but today I'll show you a tool. This is where I Alt-tab into Revit and actually Google Chrome. Yay, Chrome. So Anchor is a, how do I say? As I said earlier in the presentation, we came to this idea because we were like building a bunch of scripts to do workflows like this, move data in and out, CSV, Revit, IFC, boom, 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 batch process of Revit files. So we started getting really tired of those scripts. And when you go to AnchorDB.com, our website, you can see goodbye scripts, hello data. If you have access to this product, you can go and sign in. When you sign in, you come to something that looks like this. And Anchor, in very, very simple ways, is a database outside of Revit that connects to as many BIM sources that you want. And it merges those BIMs, the elements and attributes, remember, with client requirements and automates the production and quality assurance of that data. So it's a database on a server in Holland with a web front end that you can use and manage that is super, super, super simple. There's a couple of things here. You can download the Revit plugin. You can download an IFC importer that will batch import IFC files while you sleep. You have a bunch of properties here that can change anytime during the project. A lot of people today have problem, for instance, renaming shared parameters in Revit, and that is like a headache that probably Autodesk have. Maybe they have already solved it. But this is like super easy to do when that data is being managed outside of Revit. We have, of course, have the Revit properties and the IFC schema inside here so that when we load in Revit files and IFC files, all the hard-coded data is understood. And then you have projects, team members, projects. And if I go into one project, it gets synced whenever I change something in Revit, and that is really cool. Like 1 hour ago, I synced this Revit file, and if I go into Revit and just save it, I don't have to do anything. Like people can keep working in Revit how they want, and that is really important for me, that we don't introduce a bunch of new tools and a whole new platform, that we integrate with current workflows, which is something that I think is really important. So when I click save in Revit, it starts updating the properties 16 seconds ago in Revit, and that just feeds the delta of the Revit file into Anchor. There's a police car, sorry. And people can keep working how they want. Whenever anyone who has Anchor installed in Revit and does that, updates the database. So once I've done that, what has happened really is that I have pushed all the elements in Revit to the database and updated it. So the database inside of on that server in Holland with the web front end that I'm looking at now, it updates and is always one-to-one with the Revit database that you push to your central file, whether you work locally or on BIM 360. So it's always one-to-one. And then it aggregates all that data from different Revit files in this one database. Well, yeah, I suppose I can start in retro from the sequence that I had before. We were talking about the building owners, the contractors, and the architect, and now I can start with the architect. So what would an architect do? An architect would do different things. So one example would be, I need every single element in my entire data set. Like imagine you have 15 Revit files. Different people are working on those Revit files. You install Anchor or a similar tool on their computers, and then you set up a rule in Anchor that says that any element at any given time in this data set is always going to have a parameter. So that is a very, very common problem. Like remember the architects that I've told you about before, that when then they would go into a model like this and then add a new chair sync, and then every time you do that, you would have to run a Dynamo script or a Grasshopper script or a Revit add-in or something like that. And we can do that based on events because the data is outside of Revit. So these, I'll use the chairs just for simple, stupid examples. But when I add a new chair, it needs to get a certain amount of data. Let me open my Anchor properties. So if we do like this, whoops. And sorry if my web camera is going back and forth. It's because I'm getting excited with my keyboard and then the camera is moving. So I'll try to keep still. So my Anchor properties are looking at Anchor data on the web. So when I click on an element, basically, like when I explain this to Revit people, I say that we have to stop using this properties panel because that is where everything goes wrong when you're producing quality data for digital construction and digital twins, and start using this. This is looking straight into the database in Holland, in that aggregated database for the attributes, basically. So we have elements and attributes. And the cool thing here is that whenever I add new data into Revit and save, I can execute algorithms in the web that add and update data automatically. I'll show you how you can set up something like this. And this is also cool because I can organize the data in a much better way than the properties palette in Revit can do. So these are actually P sets. This is an IFC P set. The building owner wants us to produce all of this data on this P set, and then I can see exactly in Revit how that will look in an IFC file. So what I'm going to do, let's see if I can, yeah, I'm going to take this wall and copy it over here. And then once I do that, of course, I click on this wall. It doesn't have any elements because it's a new wall. So this is the most basic version of this problem. And then what normally, when you have 15 people working on a project, that is happening all the time. So this wall has data, this wall doesn't. And then what I do is I go into my anchor here. Remember, the database is always a one-to-one with what's going on in Revit, and then I can start adding data. And I do that by creating a population algorithm. I've created here 3. One is called all, and that just says that without any filters, imagine you have 15 Revit files, no filters, all the elements in that whole data set is going to get complex number 60 and project number 14910. So if I run that population, it will run, and probably spend a few seconds doing that because I'm streaming myself to Bulgaria. And once that's done, that data actually will be populated to that wall just like it was here. You can see complex number 60 and project number 14910. Let's see. Yeah, it takes a little while sometimes, so it's not instantaneous. I can move on to the next example while I'm waiting for this this buddy to update. Oh, actually, I forgot to save, of course. Remember, a change that is inside your local file doesn't really is not valid until you pushed it to the central model, right? So I have to synchronize to central or save. And then, perfect example, actually. I have to go and run this again, populate. So that is now I've solved the Dynamo script add-in problem in a very, very mundane way. So I still have to go in here and click populate, and that's not good. So I'll show you later how we can solve that in a better way. I also create an algorithm here for my contract. So I'm working on a specific contract that's called K201. It's just a code. And we divide these projects, remember the project breakdown structure, into different contracts that are important, very, very important for the contractor, but also the building owner who follows the progress of the project to see. But here I'm using a filter first. So I'm saying, like, if I'm saying any element that is in the file facade 24 gets these properties. So then you can start building these algorithms and start working with the filters so that based on that filter, it gets this data. Based on that filter, it gets this data. And break it down all the way to the bottom to almost even single elements. So in this case, of course, I just have one Revit file, so I can run this population. I ran it 2 hours ago, so let's go back and see if this one ran. Yeah, it ran 1 minute ago, so everything should be fine here. I can click on this wall and whoop, voila. It got the complex number 60 and the project number 14910. This is really difficult, actually, to do in Revit. Really difficult. It's not difficult to build a Dynamo script, and it's not difficult to build a Revit add-in, but someone has to build it and someone has to use it. Remember, mindset. And that's the biggest problem in some of these projects today, is that, yeah, one person has to open all of the Revit files every Wednesday night and run these scripts until 2:30 in the morning before every deliverable. And that is not sustainable, guys, please. So, and then, yeah, I'm saving, of course, the best for last. And that is where you can, you understand that you can run these like algorithms, and the data here now is in the web. It's not inside of Revit, but you can add it to Revit. I have a pull button here so that if you insist, you can go and push it back into Revit and tag it and use view filters and do whatever you want with it. But the data is best when it's outside of Revit. It gets populated automatically to the IFC file during export. So whenever you export the IFC file, it will go and add itself to the elements. I believe I have so here I did a test earlier today. And see if I can move this. The properties. I have to move myself here. And then if I click on this floor, for instance, you can see that all this stuff here, this may also sound totally mundane for people who are not used to this in the building industry, But this is where it gets tough for a lot of people. Like adding that data as attributes on IFC elements is where it's like a major headache for a lot of people. So complex number 60, project number 14910, and all of this other data, who is the design lead, who is responsible for demolishing it, and so on. Oh, perfect example. Look, I used a spelling mistake, lead here with small l. So that's super simple to go back into the database and fix. All right, so are you ready for the grand finale? I will show you how to hook this up with an automation in Anchor, and then start approaching the end of the presentation. Oh, and we should not forget validation, of course. So I've also created a population for work package here that writes data from volumes and rooms to the elements that are inside these volumes and rooms. I can run this also, I think. And then I have the validation algorithm where I specify the rules. I use ChatGPT a lot for getting regex expressions. So if I need to check whether a data is always like 4 digits or something, I just ask for it and then I get the code. I punch this straight into the regex check of this property. The LOD property should always have any of these numbers. The complex number should always be 60 and so on. So this is where we specify the validation and then run it. Takes a little while to run. If you don't want to wait for it to run, then you can go, for instance, into Revit and then open validations here. And again, you're seeing the same thing. I see here that I'm running a validation on everything, so maybe I should relax a little bit with that. But it is really cool that whenever I open a validation or a table or a property, whatever, it looks at the data that's in the web database and helps me select the elements, select color elements based on data quality. So there the validation results finished, and I can see that almost half of my elements didn't pass the LOD test. So, okay, this is great, and this is the information that you push on the Teams channel and all the project directors go crazy. But even better, you can go into Revit then, open the validations. This user interface is maybe needs a little bit of work, but then I can go to my LOD and I can find the elements. Oh, here there's 110 elements that are missing the LOD. Ah, of course, yeah, the new wall, it didn't get the LOD. And the rest of the elements actually, as you can see, is like loose furniture, chairs and tables and some entourage. So that's information that probably I can filter out of the validation and do that in one place. I can even do it here using a filter for discipline lead. If we say that we take away, we're just going to validate facade and architecture and structure, then you'll see that the results change. So that is really helpful for a design team producing data that is important for contractors and building owners. And then what normally we do, the people who set this up on projects, is that they hook all of these algorithms to an automation. And this is where we approach the end of the things that I wanted to share with you today. Is that the big value of doing all of this outside of Revit is that you can configure it to run 24/7, always be updated. And one way to do that is to create an automation. I'll say, I call it run every, caps lock, run everything. When I do, I go and say that either on a schedule, like every second or every minute or every 30 minutes or something, or after all my files have been uploaded. So imagine you have 1,000 IFC files, you upload it to Anchor for validation. You don't want anything to happen until it's finished uploading all of them. Or I can say when any of these files have uploaded, and upload and sync is the same. So if I say any file upload and I have a list of Revit files, I go with this one, boom, then anytime anyone who has Anchor installed on their Revit syncs, it will run a list of actions. Those actions can either be a validation or a population. So in this case, I'm setting it up to run on a population. I'm going to populate the all algorithm. I'm going to populate the K201, remember the contract number algorithm, and then I'm going to populate a work package algorithm. All these different algorithms that I had in my population. And at the end of that, I'm going to validate all my data. I can turn this automation on and off if I want, and I can execute the sequence manually if I want by clicking automate. But in reality, what people end up doing is just leaving it like that and letting it run all the time whenever people sync or on a schedule. So now I can basically just keep working. And well, actually, let's do something fun. I'm going to bring up a table. I have these tables of elements. If I see all the instances, these are all the elements. I have ceilings, I have entourage, I have walls. I can sort and group these columns on different properties. I can go to my facade, for instance, that I use these volumes in Revit to differentiate between work packages. So this is one work package and this is one work package. And then I'm writing data from one work package to another based on this same schedule. So I can go in and color elements based on their belonging to one row or another. And then you can see this like this automatic updating if I change a work package volume, for instance, from here to here, and then move it like this. I can sync in Revit, and then the syncing will update the database in Anchor. The database updates the colors in Revit. So this way you can keep doing whatever you want always in Revit and just know that the data will always be updated. And I can do the same thing, for instance, with the furniture. Color the elements, color the furniture elements based on which room they belong to. Actually, all of these furnitures are belonging to a room here, and these are to a room here. And then I can see this blue chair here. If I move the blue chair there and save in Revit, it should get the purple color after a little while, because it moves to a different room. So we're creating relationships between elements, and we're using those relationships outside of Revit to create high quality data sets that's always updated. Where do we want to go with this? I think I'll close off the, oh, by the way, I have to show you one quick small hack that I really enjoy. Sometimes when I do facade work in Revit, I do this hack where I'm able to, oh, can you see this? In lines, TL. I do families as walls and floors. So this is a wall, but it's a family. It has a width parameter and it has a height parameter, just like a normal family, like this, but it's a wall. And the way you can do that, and a lot of people don't like you to do it because it can break workflows, but you can see that it still works with a tool like Anchor, is that you create an in-place family, you group it, you save the group, actually you copy the geometry inside the in-place family and do some group hack. Actually, I don't remember, but I have a YouTube video where I show how I do it. But it's a great, and they are even room bounding. So you don't have to worry about room separation lines when you do it. I'm gonna close this back to my presentation and talk a little bit about where I see this heading into the future. The only way that I see the building industry being able to digitize in the owner and construction phase, in this diagram displayed with construction and operations, is by getting rid of graphics and data and starting to stream, graphics and drawings, and starting to stream data from designers to receivers of data. And the only way that we can do that is by not using BIM, or the way we think about BIM originally, as the source of that information. We have to connect properties, the owner's building requirements, data requirements, with different data sources like BIM into this master database where all this production of data is happening, check it, push it into common data environments for everyone to enjoy the data, and then check it again before it goes out to construction and operations. That is the only way I can see this happening. And the tool I've shown you today is being those, the database and the two checks that both the designers and the contractors and building owners are using to quality assure things before it goes out to, well, operation basically. And in the future, what this does, and I'm really, really excited about this, what we can do with this in the future is that we can start building, and I really do the quote when I say AI, because people are using that term left and right and center everywhere for marketing purposes, but we can actually, we can build rules inside of a database like this that takes your information requirements and takes your BIM and just creates the data for you. And that is actually not that difficult. We have already started building it, and it's not in the product today, but it will be very soon. And that is really cool. And it's not even AI, it's just rules. It looks at the data that you produced on the last project, and it looks at, like, imagine the facade in Revit. You have one facade panel there that's missing the LOD property. All the others have it, and they are inside the same control zone. It's not very difficult to figure out that this one is missing some data. And this is the future. Imagine when you are an architectural firm and you have 5 different clients, they all have different requirements, and then you don't have to worry about that. You can just keep doing, use your Revit library, work with Rhino, SketchUp, whatever you want, put it into BIM, and then someone else can take care of the production of data for digital construction and operations and maintenance for you. That's potent. This is where we are heading in the future, taking that documentation arrow down so that people can spend more time designing, and then contractors can start trusting the data that we produce, and building owners can have their digital twin. Sounds like a win-win for me. And now I think I'm going to stop talking and open up for questions. Thank you so much. And do reach out to me on this email if you want to learn more about this. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now, if anyone have any questions, fire ahead.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. We do have some questions here in the chat, so I'll start with them. First, Chavdar is asking, just a second, I want to find the exact question. If you're familiar with a tool called, just a second.
Actually, I can, Peter, if you're okay with it, I can just read the questions myself.
Could you? Oh, okay. You. All right. Yeah, sure.
I opened the chat.
All right. So yeah, you could check the question there.
Yeah. So Kalina Group D, I don't know if it's a question or not, but it says he or she says level of detailing, and I expect that you are referring to the LOD.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of confusion around what it's called and what it's not called, and people call it different things. So it's LOIN, LOD. In Norway, it's called MMI. In this case, I just use this term because it's something that a lot of people have familiarity with. But what people normally are talking about when they use this data is how mature is this element. This door or window or rebar you're looking at, how ready is it? What can you do about it? And that's really the question it answers. As a contractor, what can I do with this? Because if it has that LOD or MMI or LOIN parameter, at the low number, 200, then it's just mishmash. It's not finished. I filter it out of my workflow. But it's if it gets up to like 350 and 375 and 400, then it gets important for a contractor. And the same thing also between designers. The architect, you put like 125 on an element. The engineer will know that this is like, forget about it. It's just, this is going to move. And then Shavdar Shekov is asking, are we going to receive this recording? And I feel confident saying, Peter, that you're going to push it on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah. What does Håvard think about co-builder's product Define, if he's familiar with it? Is it a little similar to Anchor? It could be. I don't know about the Define. I know co-builder well. It's a Norwegian company. I know Lars, the founder, is a great guy. So I'm sure that they are building on similar things. I don't know so much actually about co-builder's value proposition, but I think that they are more connected with the manufacturing industry, and then we are probably more connected with the design industry. So maybe there's synergy there that we could do together. Does the initial definition of properties to be included, aka the information requirements definition, happens in Anchor as well? So I don't think any of our clients are using Anchor for establishing information requirements. There are better solutions out there for doing that. Some of the hospital authorities of Norway, they have made their own SQL database with a web front end and APIs that we can connect to. So Anchor can connect to the hospital authorities' BIM requirements and stream updates if we want to. Usually we get a PDF or an Excel, but there's ultimately going to be better tools out there to handle information requirements. So at least now we just imagine integrating with these. So when you start off, when your Anchor is blank and you don't have anything in Anchor, today you can import your requirements using an API connection or a CSV import or an MVD XML import to generate all the properties that your owner needs. But as I said in the end of my presentation, I hope that we soon get into a space where we can actually maybe even just import the BIM and just fill out the missing data and add the data that a client or contractor needs. So that's really interesting space, I think, in the future. And then could you also do different work packages per family type based on the mass they are within? Yes, absolutely. 100%. That is exactly what we do. We link the elements, so a chair knows that I'm inside of this room, the wall knows that I'm inside of this mass, and you can have multiple sets of rooms and spaces, areas, mass. You can even link data from a wall to a wall or a door to a door through links. So you can establish relationships between any type of element, basically, in Revit and across Revit files. So what most people do in this case in projects is that they in big projects, make one mass file, the file that contains all these volumes, and then link it in and tell Anchor to just find out if elements are inside or outside of that. And it's really simple for most of the elements. It just looks at the bounding box middle. So every element in Revit has a bounding box, and you look at the center point for that bounding box and figure out if that center point is inside of that volume or not. And you can do that with between any element in Revit, and you can then filter using these Anchor algorithms that I showed before, and then tell the filter which data is going to move from that element to that element. So first it creates the relationship, and then you define what data you want to move between them. Thank you, Thomas, for a great question. Does this tool work with populating parameters in IFC files as well? Yes, absolutely. And it's so simple, I don't even want to show it. When you have an IFC file, and that IFC file has IFC schema information, geometry, and custom p-sets and properties, when you push that into Revit, oh man, it's getting too much now. Push that into Anchor, you make a table or an algorithm, and you can say if something is an IFC wall, it should have this and this data. And you can do the same in the table and just add that data manually, or do like the contractor did, make that data in an Excel spreadsheet and merge them inside the database, and then make sure it always updates. So yes, absolutely, editing parameters in IFC. It today works with custom p-sets and custom properties, because the moment you go and start changing IFC schema properties, it's tricky. So I can't really change something from being an IFC wall to being an IFC door today, because that would change a lot of other things. But we will do that one day for sure. We just have to figure out what those other things are. But yeah. Linked Revit files inside main file, yes. And lastly, what's the secret between the live update between web and the Revit? Well, the secret is in Bulgaria, and you can invite him for the next meeting. His name is Dimitar Venkov, and he has not alone, of course, but he has built a super nice Revit integration that just takes the change in the Revit model, doesn't push the entire database all the time. It streams it also in buckets, so that when I click sync, there's no delay to the sync time. It's just like working normally in Revit. And then if we take the small buckets and just push them into the database live without anyone noticing anything. So that's really, I mean, for me, I've used Revit for 18 years, and it's really important for me that a platform that I'm promoting, like I am, I suppose, today, that it works great with Revit. That's like a no-brainer for me. So yeah, I can't give you the secret. It's in Bulgaria, but I think that's the end of the list. Yeah. Thank you for the great questions.
Okay, I do also have some question if you are okay, and if you have time right now. Some generic questions like how often, based on your experience, do you find the information? Because you said that the building owners are asking for a lot of parameters, a lot of data, and do you find this data to be relevant, or somehow it's just because someone told them that this is important, not like they really need the information or like they really need the data, but they I don't know, find some source that says you should include this, not like that they're going to use it, but just I'm asking this because sometimes I feel like we're putting a lot of information which is really pointless to be there, and there's a lot of work done and nobody really uses this information.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a minefield, because first of all, because I don't really know. I don't know. I talk to a lot of different people, and different people have different views on the matter. But and I'm afraid to hurt anyone's feelings. But what I hear is that a lot of building owners don't really know exactly what they are going to do with this data yet. They are preparing for a digital future. A lot of the contractors feel that it's like information bloat, way too much information, and just the stuff that I need to do my job today is getting lost in the mess. A lot of architects and engineers find it meaningless and search the meaning of life, you know, in this mess, and ask exactly the question, what are you going to do with this? This takes up a lot of my time to maintain this data. Creating it the first time is not difficult. Maintaining it is difficult. And what are you going to do with it? And then never getting like a proper response. So I think it's like, I spoke with someone from United States, from New York last week, and he said, I don't know if he said exactly that, but that's how I understood it. We say, no, we don't maintain it. If you want a digital twin at the end, we will give you a digital twin at the end, but you don't have any business asking what we do until the end. So, yeah. So but that's also, you know, and then the building owner says, yeah, but if you don't start, you know, and that comes back to the mindset. If you don't start thinking about this information all the way in the beginning, it will just be shit when we come to the end, and maybe you even don't even work on the project anymore. So that's complicated, but at least these are the things that I hear. I also do hear that a lot of building owners don't know what to ask for, so they ask for more. And a lot of them have said that, well, if I ask for 100% and I get 50, that 50 is maybe good. Why would I ask for 70 if I get 35? So so they ask for more, but I think they have to also start, and they use relentlessly all these BIM consultants who I'm sure do a great job, but then only, well, if you pay a BIM consultant to create information requirements for you, they are going to do one hell of a job creating a big quantity of information requirements and even maybe sell it to you. Oh no, this parameter you can use for a bunch of things. And then if you don't know, it's difficult for you to assess the quality of that deliverable. So it's complicated, but I'm sure it will be better in the future because more building owners will understand more what they need and what they don't need. More building owners will also use each other's requirements. So I don't think everyone is going to have their own requirements. I think they have to start collaborating.
Like common standards in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, okay. And that's maybe also related to one of the next question that I was going to ask about the some sort of naming convention, because you already said that sometimes there are spelling mistakes, and aside from the spelling mistakes, some people are calling the same thing different ways. And I find that this could be a problem when dealing with data and with different requirements, because maybe it is utopia to think that everybody would call the same thing the same way, but at least some sort of standards. Otherwise, it will become really messy.
Well, what I think is going to happen in the future, and this is not the long time in the future, I think even today I talked with the product team and they told me that we have received our first IDS file from a client. So IDS is this building smart standard for information delivery specification, I believe it's called for, basically in digital information requirements. So they will contain a lot of the rules for these spelling mistakes. So you can just load the file like that into a platform like Anchor and then find all the spelling mistakes. But that's for the validation. For the creation of data, I think that simple user interface like the one that we have built, I didn't get to show it and I don't want to show it now, but you know, in Revit, you have to create a string property, and then in the string property, you have to type something with the keyboard. And it's very simple in Anchor to just create a list of allowed values, so that when you click on that chair and you go to that property and you click on the LOD, for instance, LOD gives you a pull-down menu of the allowed values. And then voila, spelling mistakes are gone. So simple things like that, I think, is going to help greatly on our ability to produce quality data without spelling mistakes. And it's crazy because when you talk to people who don't come from the AEC industry, people who come from IT industry or oil industry, and you say the biggest problem we have in digital construction is spelling mistakes, they wonder, what planet did I land on? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too. It was really interesting, at least I think for the most of our audience here. Some of them are asked the questions, so this means that they really got into your presentation. So I'm really happy that you accepted our invitation and we had the chance to talk with you about BIM and the future, which is very exciting.
Thank you, Peter, for the invitation, and thank you everyone who listened in. I was thinking before the event, I was thinking, no way we are talking for 2 hours. That's way too long. But I look at the clock and it's almost
really?
it's more than an hour and a half.
Okay, so that means that you grabbed our attention very well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.